that the counting of the Omer, or the period of the Omer, has two different rituals which are not intrinsically connected. One is the mitzvah of counting the days, which we talked about the different opinions, Tosfos, the Rambam, and Rabbeinu Yerucham. Then we have a totally separate mitzvah, which is clearly rabbinic, and that is the mitzvah of various forms of avelos, various forms of mourning. And that is not from the Gemara, that is not from the Talmud itself, but this was a custom that began in the period of the Gaonim, where it was recorded that Yesh Makomos, there are places in which the custom is not to get married between Pesach and Shavuos, to commemorate or to memorialize the deaths of the 24,000 students of Rabbi Akiva. Now, I want to be very, very specific as to what the halacha says you're not allowed to do during the Omer. I mean, part of the problem is people sometimes confuse the Omer period with the 3 weeks in the summer, which are also a time of mourning over the Churban Beis HaMikdash, and the halachos are not exactly the same. So in terms of Sfira, there's only two activities that the Shulchan Aruch actually prohibits. Only two, no more than two. Activity number one is getting married. You're not allowed to get married. Again, I'll talk in a few moments what is the Sfira period. That's a separate issue. But not allowed to get married. Number two, not allowed to get haircuts or shaving. So you will notice in that list of two things, it does not mention listening to music. Now, anyone that was raised Orthodox heard from the time we were little kids, can't listen to music during Sfira. But when you get older and you ask the Rav, show me where the Shulchan Aruch or the Mishnah Berurah says you're not allowed to listen to music during Sfira. So the rabbi figures, it's got to be in there. I mean, of course it's in there, right? So you're leafing through the pages and looking and looking and looking and looking. Okay, you can, if you haven't discovered it yourself, you can trust me on this one. There is absolutely nothing in the Shulchan Aruch or the Ramah that says you cannot listen to music during Sfira. So what conclusion are you going to draw? So you might draw a conclusion. Well, if it doesn't say that it's usher, it ought to be mutter. Not so fast. Rav Moshe Feinstein points out that the reason why the Shulchan Aruch does not say you're not allowed to listen to music during Sfira is because the Shulchan Aruch rules you're not allowed to listen to music the whole year, because that is Zecher L'Chorban, to commemorate the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash. Unless you're at a wedding, a mitzvah, one is not allowed, according to the Shulchan Aruch, one is not allowed to listen to music. As a result, there was no need to single out Sfira of the 3 weeks. So if some guy says, as often in the modern Orthodox world, people say, I don't want to follow any new chumras. I'm going to go with the Shulchan Aruch. Don't bother me with extra things that later rabbis say. And I want to listen to music. Say, well, sorry guy, you want to follow the Shulchan Aruch, you don't listen to music at all. So Rav Moshe writes, for various reasons, we have been makel in music during the year, primarily based on the shita that the prohibition of listening to music is only while you're eating, only at a meal. It doesn't apply out of a meal. But during Sfira and during the 3 weeks, it is proper to be machmir by what you should have been following the whole year, which means the following. There is no special prohibition of music during Sfiras HaOmer. There is no special prohibition of music during the 3 weeks. The prohibition is the prohibition that should have been applied the whole year. But if we don't do it the whole year, because we're somech on different leniencies, because of depression and anxiety, l'chol hapachos, we should be machmer during Sfira. So this is a very important point. The reason why the Shulchan Aruch does not mention a prohibition of music during the Omer is because there is no special prohibition of music during the Omer, but it became a minhag Yisrael to be machmir with what you are makel on the whole year, to be machmir during Sfira. Now, obviously, I'm not going to give you final psukim and everything. What is the music that is usher? So as you might expect, there are a gazillion different views. Live musical instruments is the core of what is usher, that's for sure. What about if it is recorded? Machlokas, but the minhag is we are machmir on recorded instrumental music. What about a cappella, whether it's live a cappella or recorded a cappella? Many people are lenient. That's why they produce what are called sphira tapes, right? Or sphira, what CDs or whatever it would be. So again, ask your local Orthodox rabbi. Maybe that's me, maybe not. But whatever it would be, live instrumental for sure is aser mitam this minhag. Recorded instrumental, the minhag is to be machmir. A cappella, either live or instrumental, is machlokes. And the like. By the way, this is not only Nogeya Sphira, the 3 weeks. This is also Nogeya, a much longer period. If, God forbid, a person is a mourner, they are in Avelis over a father or a mother, you're not allowed to listen to music for 12 months. That's a very long time. And we have similar questions about a cappella and recording and the like. I also do want to point out a few other things that one has to consider. If one is depressed, or one is anxious, and one needs music to be able to relax them or calm them down, there absolutely is a heter to listen to it. You should listen to it with headphones. It shouldn't be something loud, and preferably it should not be bouncing chasna type music. It should be, slow, whether it be classical music or devekus songs, songs that are slower and yearning. That would be appropriate. Now, people also ask, am I allowed to listen to music, recorded music, if I am exercising? Let's assume I'm jogging or I'm working on a treadmill or whatever, and it's hard for me to keep my rhythm unless I have music. That's a little more difficult to matter in some ways, because typically the music you need for exercising will tend to be fast bouncing music. I mean, you're not going to listen to a slow Devekus tune while you're on a treadmill. It doesn't really get you in the rhythm of the exercise. But even then, if it's only while you're exercising, it's while you're able to, in order to be able to do your exercising, once again, there is a heter. So we are fairly lenient on all of these aspects of music, because once again, there was no miyuchadika, there was no specific prohibition of music during Sphira. It was simply an extension of the prohibition that would apply the whole year. Now, to go backwards for a moment about haircuts, people ask the question about haircuts. Can I get a haircut or a shave if it's necessary for a job, either job interview or job performance? If it is necessary, and you got to be careful, don't just be mezalzel, yes. But then there's a strange case that really bothers me. I don't really have a great explanation for this. Am I allowed to get a haircut if I'm dating, so I'll look better? Well, I assume if you're dating a religious girl, she will not hold it against. She won't say, "Oh, what a slob! He didn't shave during Sphira." I mean, if anything, I don't know. Maybe I can't speak from the perspective of a girl, but I'm a religious girl, and the guy shows up clean shaven and says, "What type of guy shaves during Sphira?" So I don't know why it would be considered to be a black mark. Nevertheless, as strange as it is to me, poskim have permitted shaving and haircuts for shidduchim. They actually have permitted it. They've considered that to be a tzorech mitzvah. Although I have to say that's a little inexplicable to me, the logic of that. But who knows? Maybe feminine logic might be beyond rational debate. Yeah.
So kind of a double side question. I assume that Shabbos supersedes because people sing Shabbos during Sphira.
Well, one second. Vocal singing for sure is okay. I mean, that's what I'm saying. A cappella. Singing without instrumental music is mutter even during the week. So if you wanted to sing a nigun, that's perfectly fine. So kal v'chomer on Shabbos. The question is only instrumental. And then a cappella recording, some say the recording itself is like a musical instrument. That's why there's... So live a cappella for sure is... Maybe I misspoke. Live a cappella for sure is okay. The shaila is whether recording a cappella is like an instrument, so to speak, and therefore that would be nichlal in the problem of instrumental music.
And to that, would you consider like people that do like poetry or maybe even rap to be considered not music?
So there the poskim have given a heter for it, in the sense that it's really a rhythmic type of speech, and it may not technically be classified as music.
With why poskim may have permitted shaving for dating, do you think that, this is a little hard to express, the fact that they permitted it makes it so that then a girl cannot judge the guy for not being religious because now it's permitted?
Yes. Well, I don't know if that's the reason for it, but yes, it would now stand to reason that the girl cannot take his. Well, it works interesting. She can now hold his not shaving as a negative,
right,
and the shaving is no longer a negative because there's a heter to shave.
Right.
But it would seem to me that instead of making a heter to the halacha, the poskim could have said, we follow the halacha, and therefore she cannot hold it against him, right? So, but you're correct. Once there's such a heter, at that point, a boy who doesn't shave would have more of a burden of explanation. Yeah.
I don't know exactly whose shitta this is. I know there's many floating around, but I've heard it put that the way people related to music in the days of Chazal was much more kind of formal. You'd only really hear music if you were at a simcha or something like that. And obviously with like live instruments and a whole band, whereas these days our the modern relationship to music is you just put your headphones in any hour of the day. Like we just have a very different relationship with music.
Well, yeah, that in a way could express the idea that the prohibition of there's the svara why we are makel in music the whole year, even though the Shulchan Aruch says it's usher, is that the prohibition is only when you were sitting at like a formal banquet type meal, like at a wedding, but except it wouldn't be a wedding, and then they would play music like in a fancy restaurant, and it never applied bichlal to casual music. So you are correct that is the svara of those who are makel, but the Shulchan Aruch himself was not makel in that way. He simply said, that's the way it is, that one does not listen to music, zecher l'chorban. Yeah.
Possible to say that Shulchan Aruch maybe even would agree that recorded music nowadays wouldn't be b'chlal the.
Yeah, that's entirely possible. Sure, that's what I'm saying. There are poskim who permit mamish recorded instrumental music. Yeah, there are those who do.
During Sphere?
No, during Sphere. Yeah, even during Sphere. Yeah, there are. But the minhag is to be machmer on recorded instrumental music. Yeah.
One thing that's hard for me to understand is that, especially in the past, maybe less so today, but especially in the past, a lot of music was intended to evoke mourning and sadness. And so why did the Shulchan Aruch and the poskim allow this kind of music? Is it just a gezerah?
Right, so the question you're asking is, if the prohibition of music generally is zecher l'chorban, to commemorate the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash and not be overly happy, then why should sad music ever be usher? Why can't I even do it on Tisha B'Av? I mean, why can't I take like a slow, sad nigun, even with an orchestra, and play it on Tisha B'Av? Like, what's the problem? It's a very good question. One answer might be, as you said, a low plug, that since there are different types of music, so we're not going to say you're allowed to do this and not that. We kind of make it in one category. The other is that even what you might call sad music actually can give a person a certain sense of joy. There's a certain release and happiness in music, even when it's seemingly sad, cathartic, right? That's correct. Okay. So again, I'll talk a little later about the mourning periods, because once again, the Sviras HaOmer is 49 days. The Avelus of the Omer is only part of that time, and there are many, many different customs. Let me just list the customs. I want to go into something else, but I'll just list the customs. So, again, a lot of you are probably familiar with it, but just to be sure everybody's on the same page. Custom number one is the Shita of the Mechaber, which is followed by many Sfardim, because that's Rav Yosef Karo's Shita. And fascinatingly enough, this does not give you a heter on Lag BaOmer. The Shita number one says, the students of Rabbi Akiva died for 33 consecutive days from the second day of Pesach through the 33rd day of the Omer. In other words, they died for 33 days. The mourning must be observed for 33 days, and only from the 34th day of the Omer onwards is everything going to be permitted. This is called the Lad Ba'omer Shita. Not Lag Ba'omer, but Lad Ba'omer. 33 full days of Avelut, and everything is mutar after Lag Ba'omer. After, not including, after Lag Ba'omer. That's Shita number one. The Ramah brings a few minhagim, but the first Shita the Ramah brings is almost the same, except for 1 day difference, and that is, they did die for 33 consecutive days, which would mean from second day of Pesach till Lag BaOmer. They died on Lag BaOmer. But the Ramah says we have a general principle that in the last day of mourning, we always say, Miktsas Hayom Kekula. Let's say Shiva is a good example. When a person is sitting Shiva, so they mourn for 6 days, and the morning of the 7th day, they get up from Shiva, because the last day of a mourning period, you always say, Miktsas Hayom, part of the day, is good. So the Ramah's first opinion just changes the Mechaber by 1 day. Instead of mourning for 33 days and matering the Avelis from the 34th day of the Omer, we matir the Avelis on Lag BaOmer itself. But there's a machlokas. Why does the Ramah do that? I gave you one view. According to one view, the Ramah is Moda. They died on Lag BaOmer, but he applies the rule of Miktsas Hayom Kekula. According to another interpretation, the Ramah says they didn't die on Lag BaOmer. Now, there's a big nafkamina, and that is, are you allowed to make a wedding the night of Lag BaOmer? Are you allowed to listen to music the night of Lag BaOmer? Or do you have to wait until daylight hours? Now let me explain. By Shiva, when a person sits Shiva, and they get up from Shiva, the last day of Shiva, and that's because of the principle Miktsas Hayom Kikulo, that requires a little bit of mourning into the day, meaning you don't get up from Shiva at night as soon as the 7th day begins. You get up from Shiva after Shachris of the morning. So if the Ramah is Moda to the Mechaber, that Talmidim of Rabbi Akiva still died on Lag BaOmer. But the reason we matter Lag BaOmer is Miktsas Hayom Kikulo. Then weddings on Lag BaOmer and haircuts on Lag BaOmer, and maybe even music on Lag BaOmer, would only be permitted in the morning, but you would not be permitted to get married or to get a haircut at night, because Miktsas Hayom Kekulo always means you have to have part of the day going into the morning hours. Masha'ein Kain, if the Ramah maintains that nobody died on Lag BaOmer, so as soon as it's Lag BaOmer, nobody died. So there's a big nafkamina, meaning how do you understand the Ramah? The Ramah advances the Mechaber Shita by 1 day and gives you Lag BaOmer as a freebie. The question is it day Lag BaOmer or even at night Lag BaOmer? And halacha, we are machmir. We are certainly machmir on haircuts and weddings. That we should not make them Lag BaOmer at night. For music, some are actually meko, because music anyway during Sfira, as we talked about, is not explicitly prohibited, so some are meko at night, Lag BaOmer at night. Okay. Now, the common denominator between the Mechaber and the first view of the Ramah is that after this period, everything is mutter, meaning, according to the Mechaber, from the 34th day of the Omer, everything is allowed. According to the Ramah, from the 33rd day of the Omer, everything's allowed. There is no Avelos either after Lag BaOmer or from Lag BaOmer. Okay. But then there are other minhagim that are involved. Some Shitos say that yes, the students of Rabbi Akiva did die for 33 days, and we have to have 33 days of mourning restrictions, but we don't want to do them during the month of Nisan, because Nisan is a happy month. So we start our mourning from Rosh Chodesh Iyar, meaning you're allowed to get married the week after Pesach, because the Avelis begins Rosh Chodesh Iyar. Now, if you count 33 days from Rosh Chodesh Iyar, that will get you to 3 days before Shavuos. The third, right, Shavuos is the 6th of Sivan, and the 3rd, 4th, and 5th of Sivan are given the designation Shaloshes Yemei Hagbala, the 3 days of preparing for Matan Torah. So this minhag is you start from Rosh Chodesh and you go up to and not including Shaloshes Yemei Hagbala, and starting from 3rd, 4th, 5th of Sivan, everything is going to be permitted, but Lag BaOmer is still a hiatus. Meaning, if you start from the Rosh Chodesh minhag, you go to Shlosha Shemei Hagbala, Lag BaOmer is a break. Okay, that is a 3rd minhag. A 4th minhag says, hey, the same way you don't want to start during Nisan, you don't want to start on Rosh Chodesh, which is also a happy day. So they start after Rosh Chodesh, which, right, Rosh Chodesh now was what? Sunday, it was Sunday and Monday, right? So they would start on Tuesday. But you got to make up 2 days, so they will use up 2 of the days, the 3rd and the 4th of Sivan, and their Avelis will stop on the 5th of Sivan. Okay, so I think I've mentioned, 4 minhagim so far, right? The minhag of Sfardim, according to the Mechaber, is you go through Lag BaOmer, and everything is mutter from the 34th day of the Omer onwards. The second shita that the Ramah brings is you start from the 2nd day of Pesach and you go up to Lag BaOmer, but Lag BaOmer itself is mutter and onwards is mutter. Other shita is you start from Rosh Chodesh and you go up to and not including the 3rd day of Sivan, but Lag BaOmer is a hiatus. And the 4th minhag is you start after Rosh Chodesh and you go until Erev Shavuos, with Lag BaOmer being a hiatus. And the final minhag is that of the Arizal, and that is you keep Sfira mourning for 49 days with Lag BaOmer as a hiatus. But you start from the 2nd day of Pesach, you go all the way to Shavuos, but Lag BaOmer will still give you that break. So all of the minhagim have Lag BaOmer as a break, except for the shita of Rav Yosef Karo, who says Lag BaOmer is nichlal in the Avelos, and you only start from the 34th day of the Omer. Now, people always ask the following question. Can I switch customs? I take on a certain custom, maybe I picked it up from yeshiva, from my rebbeim, from my shul, whatever it would be, but I get invited to a wedding that is occurring during my period of mourning. Let's assume, for example, I go from 2nd day of Pesach to Lag BaOmer, right? Which is the first minhag of the Ramah. Or like Sfardim, I go from 2nd day of Pesach through Lag BaOmer. I get invited to a wedding right after Pesach. Or let's assume I start from Rosh Chodesh, but I get invited to a wedding by a chassan and a kala who start after Rosh Chodesh, and I get invited to a Rosh Chodesh wedding. Or I get invited to a wedding after Lag BaOmer, when I started my Avelis Rosh Chodesh, and I have to, right? And there's the problem. This is a big common problem, right? Because everyone has different minhagim. See, you have to understand, the Shulchan Aruch presupposes a much greater degree of homogeneity than exists in the modern Jewish world. You know, it used to be people didn't move around a lot. So there was a minhag of Frankfurt, that everybody in Frankfurt kept a certain minhag. Right? Now, obviously, there's no such thing as the minhag of New York. Right? That doesn't make a lot of sense. And Rav Avadia points out, it doesn't even make sense, although people like to say, the minhag of Yerushalayim. But he points out, and he's really right, there is no minhag of Yerushalayim. There are individual kehilas, Ashkenazim, Sephardim, different Hasidim, different groupings, etc. Right? So the truth of the matter is we live in a world where people have different minhagim. And the question is, I got to keep my 33 days of Avelis, unless I go like the Ari, that's 49 days, but let's put that aside. I got to keep my 30 days. But the 33 days can be counted in different ways, from second day of Pesach, from Rosh Chodesh, from after Rosh Chodesh, etc. So can I just switch and readjust? Now, obviously, I can't switch to something in which I'm taking the leniencies of all the minhagim. I can't say, for example, I start Avelis after Rosh Chodesh and I go until Lag BaOmer. That doesn't work, because that's less than 33 days. You gotta have 33 days. But can I switch from starting from here and start from here? Can I go back and forth? Okay, so here, this is actually a very complicated question. But what I want to teach you now is, most of the time, you don't need to address this question at all. Because 90% of the time, people are asking about switching minhagim because they're invited to a chasna. That's basically why people want to switch. And Rav Moshe Feinstein has a wonderful, wonderful tshuva in which he says, this has nothing to do with switching. He points out, the issur of weddings during Sfira is an issur to get married during Sfira. There is no issur to go to a wedding during Sfira. There is no issur to go to a chasna. The issur is to get married. So Rav Moshe argues, if I am invited to a chasna, and you're allowed to get married, because for you it's not the mourning period, but for me it is, I don't have to change my minhag. I keep my minhag, but I'm allowed to go to a wedding. Because there is no issur during Sfira to go to a wedding that is permissible for the chassan and the kala to have. But you may ask, well, I don't know about that. Maybe there's no issur to go to a wedding, but if the minhag is we're not allowed to listen to live instrumental music, how can I go to the wedding, unless I put earplugs in or something? I'm listening to music. So Rav Moshe has a second chiddush, right? His first chiddush is, there's no issur to go to a wedding, it's only issur to get married. His second chiddush is, once you're allowed to go to a wedding, you are even allowed to listen to the music that's being played at the wedding, because that's part of the mitzvah of Simchas Chasen V'Kala. And then he says a third chiddush. Let's assume it's my mourning period, so I didn't get a haircut. Let's assume I look a little unkempt. Rav Moshe says, you are even allowed to get a haircut, l'chavay the chasen and the kala, to be able to go to their wedding. So the point I'm making is, let's imagine, again, let's take this hypothetical. Let's imagine that you're a person who starts Sfira from the second day of Pesach to Lag BaOmer. You get invited to a wedding that's the week after Pesach, the first week after Pesach. For you, it is prohibited mourning. For the chassan and the kala, it's permitted because they start their minhag Rosh Chodesh. Or just reversed. Let's imagine that you're invited to a wedding after Lag BaOmer. You start your Avelis from Rosh Chodesh, so after Lag BaOmer you can't get married. But the chassan and the kala started the second day of Pesach, and they could get married. Yeah? So Rav Moshe says, you can go to the wedding, you can listen to the music and dance at the wedding, and you can even get a haircut or a shave, l'chavay the wedding. And this does not throw off, this is important, this does not throw off your Avelos. You do not have to recompute your mourning periods in anticipation of this, because once you have a chiyuv or a mitzvah of Simchas Chasen V'Kala, the Sfira gets nitcha because of Simchas Chasen V'Kala. Not everybody will agree with that psak. I mean, some people say you're going to have to readjust your Sfira, your Avelos count for that year, which is a little complicated. Maybe I'll talk about that a little later. But this is a very important shuvah, because this basically means that the issue of changing my minhag almost becomes irrelevant. It almost becomes moot because I don't have to change my minhag. I'll go. By the way, today, this gets us to another problem of music. Today is what is called Yamazi Karon in the Israeli calendar. This is the day in which we remember the people who died in Israel's wars. And again, you may have heard the siren. I'm just wondering, I wasn't. Were you in the middle of a share? Did people stop? What did they do? Really? That's interesting. So, or Smeach is getting more Zionistic. But Baruch Hashem, I mean, certainly if you're outside, for sure you have to stop. It's a massive Chilul Hashem for a Haredi person not to stop in honor of the soldiers. In the Beis Medrash is another issue, but be it as it may, certainly it's something that we should remember. But tonight is Yom Ha'atzmaut, and maybe the Q&A, maybe we can talk Yom Ha'atzmaut a little bit, I'll save it. But halachically, the big shaila is, hey, live music on Yom Ha'atzmaut during Svira. And this is the period of the Omer that everybody observes as Avelis. It's after Rosh Chodesh, before Lag BaOmer. So what is the heter of live instrumental music, right? That's the one thing that for sure the minhag is not to do. So all I can tell you is that the Rabbanut, Harashit, the chief rabbinate, since 1948, has paskined that the simcha of this day is so great that they say that this sets aside the minhagim of not listening to music. This is a psak of the Rabbanut, so if one would listen to music, they would have poskim who would allow it. But I also have to be honest and say that a majority of poskim do not agree with the Rabbanut on this. And the majority of poskim would say that even if you celebrate Yom Ha'atzmaut, nothing to do with whether you're celebrating it or not, it would not set aside the minhag from the of not listening to live music during the Omer. So, you have to make your own decision, so to speak. But this is at least a machlokas. There are shitos that do permit it. Yeah.
What about Sephardim that go to Maron on Lag BaOmer because there's music there?
That's really a very good kasha, because they're not following the view of Rav Yosef Karo. And now the truth is, Sephardim, sometimes we're too Ashkenazi based, and we look at all Sephardim as the same. Just as Sephardim might look at all Ashkenazim as the same. But Sephardim are very, very different. There's Moroccans, Tunisians, Algerians, Iraqis, Syrians, and they have many, many different minhagim. Now, Sephardim from Morocco, very, very, very often follow the hadracha of the Ramah. The notion that Sephardim follow Rav Yosef Karo is not entirely true. Now, Rav Adya Yosef hated that. Rav Adya Yosef had a big, big machlokas with Moroccan Sephardim. Mordechai Eliyahu was a Moroccan great Talmud Chacham. And Rav Adya even said, this is almost an atrocious remark, he even said that the reason Moroccans followed the Ramah is because there were so many Amoratzim there, and the only schools in Morocco were Chabad schools. So Chabad just taught everybody Ashkenazic minhagim, and that's why the Moroccans became de facto Ashkenazim. Well, the Moroccan rabbinate were very, very offended by that, and they pointed out they were not following the Ramah. Rather, they had the same minhagim as what the Ramah codified 1,000 years earlier. In other words, they weren't following the Ramah. It happened to be that their conclusion in halacha happened to be similar to that of the Ramah. So those Sephardim go to Meron on Lag BaOmer, and those who are less religious also go to Meron on Lag BaOmer. But a religious Sephardi who follows Rav Yosef Karo, l'chara would not be allowed to do that. Yeah.
Going back to the Chuvot,
Yeah.
going to that, what would you say
Say again. What would it be? What?
What would he say when it comes to someone who's in real life?
Oh, okay. Very, very good question. What would be? Yeah. So that's a very different. That's a difference. The difference is this: by svira, the halacha prohibits getting married. By avelos, the halacha prohibits entering a house of celebration. So, Rav Moshe's heter in and of itself would only apply to svira. It would not apply to avelos. And then avelos, we have to come up with other heterim. For example, the avel might go to the wedding if he's going to work, like pass out benchers or take pictures. In other words, you need other heterim to make him a worker. You see, the difference is pasha. The difference is that for svira, the isser is getting married. For avelus, the isser is entering a house of celebration. And that's why Rav Moshe Cedar would not apply to avelus. We have other heterim that might apply. Yeah.
What if you're an avelus and your child gets married?
No. So this is the important point. Rav Moshe Cedar has nothing to do with that. Well, right, but we'll have other heterim. So we'll basically say you should go there and be in a working capacity, taking pictures, passing out benchers. Even then, some people are very machmir. To walk your child down the chuppah for sure is mutter, but some say when it comes to the meal, the avel should not eat in the hall with everybody. He should eat on the side room and the like, or he shouldn't have a makam kavua. He shouldn't have a regular seat. He should just walk around the hall. And even in terms of dancing, many Rabbanim would say they would allow a 5-minute dance with your child, or let's say it's your son, but after that you don't dance. So different Rabbanim are stricter or less strict, because obviously it's important for a parent to be at the wedding of a child, but I want to again emphasize that Rav Moshe's heter has nothing to do with that. Rav Moshe's heter would not apply. We would have to develop other heterim for that situation. And then it gets a question of how far do you extend those heterim? Is that only for a parent to a child? What about to a good friend, or what if you're an uncle, right? Maybe there are special heterim for parents that we would not make available for other situations. Other people are more mako, even with other close friends and close relatives and the like. Of course, the interesting question is, by Avelis, should a child delay getting engaged or getting married to wait until their parent is out of Avelis? I mean, let's imagine somebody is getting married and then chas v'shalom, a grandparent dies, so their father is now a mourner for 12 months. Is it kedai to wait? So even though I could see a logic for that, maybe it depends how much time is left, maybe if it's, but the minhag is very, very clear that we never tell a chassan or a kala to delay their wedding or engagement because their parent is in Avelis. They might decide on their own, but in terms of halacha, they are not given the psak to delay getting married, because getting married is such a great, great mitzvah that if they're not in Avelis, we will not limit how soon they could get married. But again, this is an important yesod. Rav Moshe is dealing with Sfira. Sfira does not say you can't go to a wedding. Sfira says you can't get married. Avela says you're not supposed to go to a wedding because an avel should not enter a base Mishnah. One final thing, then we'll break. There is another halacha that's brought down by Sfira. You sometimes hear you're not supposed to buy new things during Sfira. Let me clarify that. There is no such halacha. There is a minhag that says we do not make a shechiyanu during Sfira because it's not a happy time. Mimela, any type of purchase for which you would make a shechiyanu should be deferred during Sfira. But if it's during the period that you do mourning, but if it's a purchase you do not make a shechiyanu for, there's no problem with purchasing. Now, the most common purchase that people make a shechiyanu is an article of clothing. Now, that's not so pashut. I mean, not everybody makes a shechiyanu on new clothing. Some people say, the bracha of shechiyanu on new clothing dated from a time when people were very poor and they would buy a new article of clothing like every 20 years. And that was such a great simcha. Today, where it's relatively commonplace, middle class people can buy clothing with some frequency. Some say it's not a type of simcha that creates a shechiyanu. Other people do make a shechiyanu. But again, they don't make a shechiyanu on everything. Socks and underwear, people don't make a shechiyanu for. Even a shirt, many people will not make shechiyanu, they'll only do it for a suit. Shoes, the Ramah brings an interesting minhag that you don't make shechiyanu on shoes, or leather shoes. Interestingly, because since an animal had to die, we don't say shechiyanu for it. So it turns out, therefore, any purchase for which you're not going to make a shechiyanu is bichlal mutter during Sfira. That's one thing to keep in mind. And the other thing to keep in mind is that the minhag of not making shechiyanu doesn't apply to Shabbos. So even if you're buying a new suit during Sfira, if you're not going to wear it, I mean after alterations, you're not going to wear it until Shabbos, you can make you can buy the suit and make the shechiyanu on Shabbos. Okay, so now there is another view, by the way, that says the whole thing is a mistake. The whole rule against shechiyanu referred to the 3 weeks and not Sfira. And during Sfira, there's bichlal no prohibition of shechiyanu. So there are different shittas about this. But the common denominator is, if it's a non-shechiyanu purchase, there is absolutely no problem with doing it during Sfira. It's only the shechiyanu that creates the problem, and that doesn't apply on Shabbos, and there are those that say it doesn't apply on Sfira. It was only a 3 weeks halacha. Same thing with swimming. I don't know if you've ever heard this, but there are some people who will tell you you're not allowed to go swimming during Sfira. Absolutely not true. You can go swimming during Sfira. It is brought down that there's a minhag, well, during the 9 days, it is usher to go swimming. It's brought down that even during the 3 weeks, there's a minhag not to swim, because since there's a bad mazel, it's a time of inauspicious events, so God forbid you could put yourself in sakana. But that only applies to the 3 weeks. It does not apply during Sfira. So what's happened over the years is people make a mistake, because these are the 2 periods of time where we mourn, so they kind of automatically take the 3 weeks laws and they apply them to Sfira, and that is not emes. Sfira is a different set of categories. Okay, so we'll see you tomorrow.